Well, thank you very much for coming. This is a phenomenal turnout. You know, you are the concerned people that care, that take the time out of your evening and this warm summer night to come out here, so we truly appreciate it. So thank you very much for coming. This is about the 4th or 5th in a series of town hall meetings that have been organized by individuals, and at the end of this meeting you'll meet a couple of these people who literally were just like you or I, that heard about this issue and said, something's got to be done. This particular proposal doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and I need to do something. And so these were just regular, not activists, not people in organizations, just mums and dads that said, I have to do something, and got up out of their chair and did something, and now have organized these meetings. We've had 4 or 5 town hall meetings, all very well attended. They started a petition that now, I believe, is exceeded 10,000 signatures. There's the 2 of the ladies right there. Over 10,000 signatures in about a month or 5 weeks of time. A whole set of campaign resources with signs and posters and things, all just done in their spare time, etc. So it's an inspirational story. But why were people so inspired? And part of it is because this particular application makes so little sense. So we'll just go into that in a sec. First of all, I'd just like to, I was asked to give a couple of notices. First of all, the washroom notice. There is a washroom apparently downstairs and through that door. So there's apparently there's one upstairs and downstairs, and you can get at both of them. I think the downstairs one through that right-hand door, and the upstairs one through that door. Both of them through that door? A lady who knows. Okay. Both of them through that door. I stand corrected. Second, I wanted to just make a note of, someone mentioned that if you do get a lawn sign, apparently Delta has actually removed some lawn signs that were placed on boulevards and not your property. So if you do take a lawn sign, then make sure you put it on your own property and not on Delta's or Surrey's, etc. We'd like to just, as a discussion, there may be different points of view here, and that's fine. But when we have the discussion and we have the questions at the end, I'd just like you to be respectful. We are in a church, and some higher power may decide to take matters into their own hands outside of myself. We have I think, a really interesting agenda for you today. We're going to first, I'm going to give you just a quick overview of what this issue is. Second of all, we have Phil LeGood, who was a coal port inspector and industrial inspector, and he'll give you some of his insights of what he's seen at these facilities. We have Eliza Olson, who's the president of Burns Bog Society. She'll talk about this proposal with respect to that area. We have James Wells, who has spent quite a bit of time in the United States. We have 2 visitors that have come up from Bellingham to speak with us. One is James Wells, and our final speaker will be Dr. Frank James, who I'll introduce when it's his time, who has done an amazing amount of work to understand the health impacts of transporting coal by trains. And you'll find his talk both insightful and frightening, that you will be living that close to that problem. So I'd like to recognize 2 people that I understand are here. First of all, Paul Simon, the MLA from Powell River. Where's Paul? Simon. Yes.
Paul Simon, my cousin. I represent Texas Island.
And Doug Massey. Where's Doug? Doug Massey, who's been Delta Councilor person for many years, has been very active in this issue. As you know, he's got his name on the tunnel, well, his dad's name. So has a long history on the Fraser River and in Ladner, etc. And he's come over tonight as well. So, what is the issue? Well, the proposal is that Fraser Surrey Docks has a proposal to bring coal from the Wyoming's Powder River Basin to a new coal handling facility they're going to build just below us here. Then why do the Americans need to export thermal coal now, and why bring it through Canada? Why wouldn't it be a lot shorter and quicker to bring that coal through U.S. ports? Well, first of all, why do they have this coal? Many of the U.S. power generation companies that have used coal and are customers of this mine and have used coal to generate electricity are now using natural gas, because the United States has a big campaign of natural gas fracking. They all of a sudden have an abundance of natural gas, and a lot of these people are saying it's cheaper and cleaner for us to switch over to natural gas. So they're actually stopping the use of coal in the United States from these big power plants. And this company is saying we are losing on some of our huge customers. We need to find some other markets for this product. So the obvious market is China. Let's ship this material to China. And as James Well will tell us later on, the value of this material this is incredibly low-grade coal. It's actually, as James puts it, I'm stealing a little bit of his thunder, if you had good dirt, it's worth more. It sells from the mine at about 12 bucks a ton. So this is very, very inexpensive stuff. But they said, well, we'll ship it to China. But even China has now said, we are killing our citizens. It's been proven that we're killing our citizens. We're shortening the lives of our children by the fact that the air pollution in our cities is so bad. The citizens in China is saying, please stop this. So these people are looking and saying, our US customers are going away, and even China, which will accept it right now, we can see that at some point in time, they'll say no to. So we may have to leave this coal in the ground. So why don't we get it out of here as fast as possible? Well, why not go through a US port? Why bring it up through Canada? There's been a number, I believe the number is 6 US port applications. 3 have been rejected, 3 are in the works. They're all on pretty shaky ground. Because in the United States, the process that you use to approve these applications is very public and quite long. So the public can comment, they go on for a long time, there's lots of opportunity for public comments, public meetings, etc. And they discovered that Canada has actually greased the skids for these kinds of proposals. In Canada, Port Metro Vancouver has been designated as the operator of all ports in BC, and ports have been designated as in the national interest. So Port Metro Vancouver only reports to the National Minister of Transportation. They can buy agricultural land. They can override any civic, provincial, regional law that they want. They can buy land, put things in, and when, in this case, Surrey Fraser Docks, which is their tenant, says, I think we'd like to import coal and create this shipping facility, they make an application to their landlord, who's Port Metro Vancouver, and say, could we do this? But Port Metro Vancouver says, well, yes, but you'll have to pass an environmental review. And that environmental review is one that we'll create, and we'll judge, and we'll approve. So they've absolutely eliminated any possible barrier. I asked a Port Metro Vancouver person once, has there been any application that you've had an environmental review for that you have not approved? And they said no. So it's a closed system. In addition, a lot of press was given to the fact that Port Metro Vancouver has a governance structure that's archaic. The people who are on the board of directors of Port Metro Vancouver are the people who own Neptune terminals and all the big shipping conglomerates. So there's no outside direction. There's basically no outside directors, etc. There's a couple nominated by the province. So you have a system where the board of Port Metro Vancouver is all the proponents effectively, and they've been given virtually unlimited power to go ahead and approve this. So in this case, a lot of people have said, why are you holding these meetings at all? Because at any time at all, Port Metro Vancouver can say, done, approve, go forward. And so the cynical people say, there's no point. But there is a point, because Fraser Surrey Docks plan to have this facility up and running by February, or at least starting construction. And here we are in September, and it hasn't happened. So this groundswell of opposition, of people who've come out and just said, this application makes virtually no sense, has really had an impact. So where will this coal come from? Well, it comes from the Powder River Basin in Wyoming. But to get to here, first of all, it has to cross the US border, go right through the center of White Rock. And if you've been down to the pier, you know where the trains go. And when it goes through the pier, it completely shuts off the pier from all the businesses. So White Rock has passed a motion, the City Council of White Rock has passed a motion saying we absolutely oppose this, we weren't consulted, it tears our town apart, it has huge economic consequences for our town when trains come through and shut us off from the beach and the pier for 20 minutes at a time. Next, it travels through Crescent Beach. In Crescent Beach, no emergency vehicle can pass for 20 minutes while the train's going through. There are no other ways to get there. If you're having a heart attack, if your house is burning down, and the fire trucks need to come, there is no way to get them to you for 20 minutes while the coal train's passed. And actually, Fraser Surrey Docks wrote a response as to how they would handle that. They said, well, what we'll do is if there's an emergency, we'll have a system where we'll notify the train driver who will stop the train. Now, this is a train that's blocking the crossing. He's going to run back down the tracks. Then he's going to uncouple the car that's right where the track is. Then he's going to run back down to the other end of the train. These trains are 1.3 kilometers long. Then he's going to start the train up and move it and create an opening, and then the emergency vehicles can drive through it. I think you're faster just to wait the 20 minutes that it's going to take him to just keep driving. But anyways, that's the kind of response that we get. Then the trains pass through my community, which is Panorama Ridge, where we have the trains both going to Roberts Bank and these trains. Then it goes underneath Sunshine Hills with a proliferation of elementary schools, etc., up through Bridgeview, up through Surrey to this spot. And including, the impacts include the people in New Westminster, where there's something like 10,000 residents in the condos that are right across the street. So when you start to look at this proposal, Fraser Surrey Docks is saying that this proposal will generate 25 jobs. So to put that in perspective, I mean, that's a mid-sized Starbucks. And for 25 jobs. So I would say I will take the mid-sized Starbucks in my neighborhood versus the incredible impacts. And we're not even talking yet about the climate change issues, but the coal dust issues, the diesel particulate issues that Dr. James is going to talk to you about in a second. So if you take the 25 jobs, the Premier about a month ago announced that Eastern China Airlines was going to put one new flight a day into Vancouver, one new flight a day, coming in, coming out, lands at the airport, existing facility. She said that would create 370 new jobs in Vancouver, 370 new jobs. But you can imagine that if any one of you proposed to start a new business and said to Surrey Council, to White Rock, to New West, to Delta, and said, I'm going to start a business and it's going to create 25 jobs, but unfortunately, it's going to have all these impacts. It's going to shut the pier down for 20 minutes each way, so probably an hour a day there. It's going to shut Crescent Beach off emergency vehicles for all this time. It's going to generate coal dust, diesel particulate to all the communities it goes through. Then we're not even talking about it's going to get loaded onto barges, and then these barges on the best salmon river in BC, and anything that falls off from the wind on the barges, it's going to get trucked to Taxada Island, then it's going to get loaded again on ships, and then it's going to shipped out. And I'm going to do all that, have all those impacts, but I am going to create 25 jobs. How about that? Now, if I had a business that had those same impacts, but it wasn't coal, I know the answer would be absolutely no way. So I think that's why all of us here have said, you know, this issue, this proposal just doesn't make any economic sense whatsoever. So that's why we're here, that's why we're trying to do what we're doing. So, on to the first speaker. The first speaker tonight is Phil Goode. And Phil, as I mentioned, has spent 30 years as an inspector of industrial facilities, including coal ports. And he's going to come up and give us about 10 minutes on what he's seen at coal ports. Phil?
Thanks, Paul. Thank all of you for coming out. It was quite a day today for September, wasn't it? 26 degrees at my place in White Rock. I moved to White Rock 10 years ago when we had maybe 5-6 trains a day coming through the area there, never more than 60-car trains. We've seen 150-car trains come through, and they're up to 16 a day now, and that's not the end of it. That rail corridor was created in 1906 for steam engines with 20-car trains. They put continuous rail there, we thought, to make the rails safe, because they're hauling not just coal through there, they're hauling chlorine, ammonia, gases, the type of gases that exploded in Quebec recently. We have, 2 years ago, we had 46 landslides along the bluffs there. Last year, they had 2 landslides south of Everett that actually pushed the train off the tracks, and a few cars of container freight was there. Unfortunately, it wasn't chlorine or ammonia. Then we'd actually learn what all of this transportation is about. I've spent a bunch of years in a lot of different facilities, coal ports, mainly in Prince Rupert, although I've been to Neptune and I've been to West Shore, also here. I've seen in the last 5 years an immense expansion in coal in this province, huge. In Prince Rupert, when I first went there, they could barely get coal shipped out of there. There just wasn't a market for it. In the last 5 years, they've gone from 2 million tons to 12 million tons, and they're expanding to 25 million tons. Neptune now is looking at 20 million tons. West Shore is at 32. I'm not sure whether Delta Port 3 is going through, but if coal seems to be much more important than containers, then we can see that going up to 50 million tons. That's a lot of coal. That's a lot of trains. That's a lot of dust coming your way. I lived in Steveston when I grew up, and moved out to Tawasin, and now I'm keep searching for the fresh air, the freshest air, right? I know that the Fraser River up this way here, it's basically a funnel of air coming up, and she can blow pretty good coming up here. You can see 1 to 2 meter wakes of waves on that river if the tide is right and the wind's coming up. So you're in direct aim of any coal dust. There was a study done in UBC West Shore, about 700 tons of coal dust exits that annually on top of people around there. Most of the denser particles deposit around the facility, but it's the light particles that float that you and I can't see unless the sun's shining just right. And you're picking up silica, you're picking up heavy metals, you're picking up even uranium, especially in Powder River Basin coal. There was a USGS Geological Survey study done in the early 90s on the Powder River Basin coal, where they found in trace minerals, like these heavy metals, uranium, mercury, that there were high concentrations of that in that coal. It's called Powder River Basin coal because that's what it is, it's powdery. And so it has to be sprayed with a material on top when they ship it so it doesn't all blow out of the train when they're going fast speeds. So, but you just have to pick up a few particles of this. And we don't know what the impacts are to people around that live around coal ports because nobody's done a study to see how that is. Bob talked about that this project down here doesn't make any sense. And I tell you, it doesn't make any sense. You can't ship coal from Wyoming to here, take it off of the train, put it onto barges, ship it up to Texas Island, take it off the barges, put it onto the land, and then put it back onto big ships and sail it across the ocean. What have you done with $12 per ton? Where has it been absorbed? Who's making money here? So this project doesn't make sense. And on every project I've seen, a port in this area here in the lower mainland, they've all expanded. Van Term, Delta Port, the chemical plant in North Shore just got another 35-year lease to expand by 25%. 90% of that chlorine's heading down to the US. Why are we doing it here? Why are we taking the risk? You could not take those trains through this level of density of urban population in the United States, but they can here. We have taken our regulations here, rail safety regulations, which is a 2-volume set in the United States, almost 500 pages, and it's 23 pages here in Canada. And they're even now thinking of deregulating more. So you and I don't really matter anymore. What they're trying to do, this is a delivery port, somewhat of an export port. Our trade deficit to China has been going like this year to year. We're over $30 billion annually trade deficit, and yet we're building the South Perimeter Road to move their freight to other markets in North America, and we're taking the impacts of it. And we'll take the impacts of it to the coal that they want in there. These particles will come your way, and I'll tell you what's going to happen here. And I have to put on my glasses to read it. Just before the provincial election, there was an announcement about the George Massey Tunnel. And the sign was replacement of it. And then they gave you options. And there were other options, but it seems like the government's already got in its mind that it wants to replace that tunnel. What does that tunnel mean? A few days after the Premier, not elected at that time, announced this, the Port Metro Vancouver came out with a press release, September 28, 2012. They said, sufficient draft in the Fraser River is critical to the port's, that means Fraser Surrey Docks, ability to service the world's increasing fleet of larger vessels. The draft of the Fraser River is limited by the George Massey Tunnel, and the announcement by the BC government, replacement, will help ensure long-term viability of this port. So I'll just show you. So this is actually a train dumper in Prince Rupert. You can see, if anybody's been to Prince Rupert, you're lucky to get a sunny day. When it is, it's a beautiful place like it is here. But for the most part, this is what Prince Rupert's like. You go up there in August, it's 14 degrees C, and it rains. So I'd prefer not to go up there anymore unless it's in, in a time when it's raining here. So if you notice that this is actually the dust suppression system, these two big things here, that's the dumper turning there. And see, you've got rain, plus you have a water system that sprays the cars as they're dumping to alleviate the dust. If you look at those filtering systems, all that black stuff is coal. And that's after the rains, and the rains, and the rains that's there. Even the best, they just actually put in some more dumpers there to increase their capacity, and it's a vacuum system, and the operators there have to wear masks. It doesn't work. Even covered conveyors, you have problems with that is because when you have wet coal, it sticks to the conveyors, it goes around, it gets slumped down the bottom. Somehow they have to get it out of there. It's usually done with fire hoses, and it's usually done over the water. This is what they call a stacker reclaimer. So it gets off the trains, it runs along here, and that thing piles it up. And that digger there will actually dig it up, put it on the conveyors, and send it out to the docks for loading. And I'm showing you these pictures because that's what's going to be happening here. This proposal is a foot in the door. This is going to be a major coal port. If that tunnel comes out, the largest ships in the world will come up here to load. And you're not talking one train a day. You're not talking 30,000 tons on the dock. You're talking maybe 5 to 6 million tons sitting there waiting to go in. But you're talking about 15,000 tons coming in maybe 6 to 10 times a day into this area here. It's a 24-hour operation, 7 days a week, and it's loud. This is a monster machine. If you see where the operator is, I'll try to point my finger. That's where the guy sits. And I've been up there and out there. That's another picture of it. This area here is supposed to be a roadway. It's covered in coal. The rails you no longer can see. Nobody sees.
Is the pile coal?
That's all coal. Those are coal. And that's 3 years ago. You cannot find an empty space in Prince Rupert to put coal now. They were taking Powder River Basin Coal, and Teck and the other providers of Canadian coal were really upset that they were bringing it up because they need the capacity too. So for some reason, the CEO of that particular port's from the United States, and he found a way to get BNSF and Powder River Basin Coal up through Canada, up to Prince Rupert. That's how desperate they are to get this coal out. There's one of the largest ships coming in. Imagine that coming up the Fraser River. Not just one. So that's, you can pretty well see the size of the facility you're going to have here. So this land mass that they have for Fraser Surrey Docks, no different than Neptune. So they're at 12 million tons, going to be going to 20 million tons. You can see the coal dust on top of the ship. That's washed off as the ship leaves. It goes into the ocean. That's coal dust in the ocean. That's heading towards the mouth of the Skeena River, another one of the major fish rearing and spawning areas. Floating away. There's your local fish boat. And of course, even daisies come up through the rocks there. So it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense is because the plans are much further in the future than you and I are looking at or what they want us to see. They want us to see a little tiny operation here, all closed and intact and everything. But that's not the case. I have grandchildren now. I'm concerned whether they're going to have the life that I got to live as I was a kid and grew up to be an adult and had the type of life I have. And I think you need to be too. It's not just our life. It's not just our future. It's our children's future, our grandchildren's future, and their children's future. And this is a project that will last at least 35 years into the future, if not more. So we got to think about what future we want to have. It's our choice, not a handful of people making decisions for us. And they've made a mess of this area as it is. Look at Delta, South Delta. Look at what's going on there. Where do people have a say in this matter? So it's up to us to stand up and start speaking out. I no longer inspect coal ports. That's out of my realm now. So I'm taking myself out of that mix and speaking about it and seeing the farce of this proposal here and trying to communicate to you that the future is lots of coal coming out of Fraser Surrey Docks. Prince Rupert, despite expansion of the coal port, despite expansion and the new container port, every year I go there, there's more stores closed, more stores for lease, and it's even more empty. The only thing that's busy are the hotels with all the construction people, engineers all passing through. They're doing well. Everybody else isn't. And a very few jobs are going on. Some longshoring jobs, very few other jobs. In 30 years, since I've been going up there, since Prince Rupert started, I have not seen one government agent responsible for the environment to stand up and put an end to that dust. That's not anything. When they're bringing the coal, there's different grades. They get to a certain point, they stop because they've got the ship. All the stuff's still on the thing that they wash it off with fire hoses. It goes into the ocean. Nobody has ever stopped that. Finally, some whistleblower on site there produced pictures and everything for them. We still haven't heard whether Environment Canada Fisheries is actually going to step down on these guys and make them do the thing they promised 30 years ago. They were supposed to have a clean act, and it's anything but. And that will be the same here. It's the same at West Shore. It's the same at Neptune. So do whatever you can. Whatever the other people come up and talk to you about, do whatever you can to make your voices heard. They're afraid. They've heard the dissension so far, but not everybody knows about it. You guys are in direct path of it. I live in White Rock. I got to put up with the trains. You're going to put up with the whole mess that's coming here. Thanks.
Thank you, Phil. The lady next to me said I didn't introduce myself when I started. My name is Bob Campbell. I live in Panorama Ridge, so we've had a train issue there for about 20 years. I'm a professional engineer. I've worked in the tech business all my life, but I've been very involved in my community for about 25 years and sit on a lot of City of Surrey committees, etc. And when I heard about this issue, I just couldn't not get involved. And when I was inspired by the people that I saw that were standing up and getting involved, so I had no choice. I had to get involved. Our next speaker is another inspirational person, Eliza. Where is Eliza? Eliza Olson, who has pretty much personally saved Burns Bog to what it is today through her perseverance over many years, is here to talk to us. So, Eliza Olson.
Thank you for that, but you know, I realized it wasn't just me that got the bog set aside. It was all people like you behind me. I just was stubborn enough to keep going and not go away, and I'm still not going away. Just for your information, I was told by a fortune teller that I was going to live so old that they were going to stick me underneath a sledgehammer and it was going to miss. So I'm going to disappoint a lot of people and hang around for a lot. Now, why on earth is the Burns Bog Conservation Society involved with this coal issue? Well, the Society is dedicated to saving one of the largest carbon sinks next to a major city. Peat is carbon, and when you start digging in it and destroying it, you're putting carbon back into the atmosphere. We've only got 3% of the Earth's surface covered with peat, but their destruction is responsible for 6 to 10% of the world's greenhouse gases. So what is coal? Well, I just went on Wikipedia, and what they said coal is compressed peat that's been under pressure for millions of years and extreme heat. So what you've got when you are looking at coal is compressed peat. And what is peat? It's carbon. When you destroy carbon, you're putting greenhouse gases back into the atmosphere. We are all experiencing what's happening because of all the problems with our carbon and our greenhouse gases, and if we don't stop it, it's going to get worse. Now, it's estimated it takes 3 to 10 feet of peat to create 1 foot of coal. So think about Burns Bog. There was an estimate that when it was 10,000 acres, it housed the equivalent of the emissions of 6.1 million cars. So if you start compressing coal or peat like that, just think how much more it holds. In the case of Burns Bog, we've got these train tracks going right along the edge along the Delta Nature Reserve. There's the potential for derailment, fires. There's sparks that could come off the railroad tracks and create a fire. Now, if you've lived in Delta for any length of time, you know what a peat fire is like. So think about coal fires, how that's going to impact us, because that coal is peat that is 3 to 7 times more compressed than the peat that's burning in the bog. One of the things I want to bring to your attention, I think you know this better than anybody else living along River Road. In the 1990s, you had huge meetings about getting trucks off River Road. And your savior was going to be the South Fraser Perimeter Road. And they convinced you how wonderful it was. But they forgot to tell you, a lot of you were going to lose your homes in the process. Others of you are faced with the South Fraser Perimeter Road in your backyard. They're trying to pull the same thing with the East Tunnel. By the way, in 1988, when we were fighting the development of Burns Bog, one of the stoppers was the Massey Tunnel. There is other ways to get cars across that Fraser River. They did it a long time before they had the tunnel. What they used is something called a ferry. The Albion ferries are out of commission. Why don't we recommission them and start running them back and forth between Ladner and Richmond like they did in the good old days and save our tunnel? And so before anybody convinces you that you should support the removal of the tunnel, think of the South Fraser Perimeter Road before you jump up and say yes. Not too long ago, well, way back in 1995 when Wally and I went to a conference in Scotland, the International Peat Convention there passed a motion that Burns Bog be expropriated and it be declared a Ramsar site. Well, a Ramsar site is a special area and it's named after a place, Ramsar, Iran. That's where they held the very first convention on wetlands of international importance. Out of that came a huge protocol. Last year in 2012, Burns Bog, along with 5 other wetlands in the Fraser, got Ramsar designation. Our mayor, Lois Jackson, I believe she couldn't make it tonight, is very proud and proudly announced how she was instrumental in A, saving the bog in 2004, and B, getting Ramsar designation. She should be given full credit for both of those. The problem is, when you go to the mayor and say, we need your help to save the bog, she buries her head in her hands and says, we can't do anything. When you sign on to have an area designated as a Ramsar site, you promise to do a lot of things, and one of them is called wise use. I don't see dumping coal dust on Burns Bog and 4 of the other wetland sites in the Fraser River Delta Ramsar site as wise use. We need our mayor, we need all our politicians to stand up. And if they won't, you and I are going to have to do it. Besides that, think of Margaret Mead. It's only been a small group of people who've ever accomplished anything. So, why is the society involved? Well, coal is compressed peat, and we're dedicated to keeping it where Mother Nature wants it, in the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Eliza. Are there any members of Delta Council present? Or the mayor? No, unfortunately not. Our next speaker is James Wells. And James in his day job, he develops information systems that support energy efficiency. but he's been writing about the environment and related issues for Bellingham Watch, and he's been working for the past 2 years to raise awareness on coal terminal proposals. And one of the volunteers organized workshops to help people write public comments about the Gateway Pacific EIS. So, James, thanks for coming up and talking to us.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bob. I guess don't need to introduce myself. I was just introduced. I just want to tell Bob, though, I'm kind of at a loss because he's stolen my lines. So what am I going to say? So as Bob described, I've spent a lot of the last 2 years working with neighbors, friends in our community to raise awareness of the proposed Gateway Pacific Terminal, which is just across the border to your south. And I want to provide just some experiences from what we've done in the last 2 years in a way that I think applies very directly to your issue here. When an applicant proposes an activity like a coal terminal, they describe it as this thing, sorry about that, which is within the boundaries of some property that they own or they're authorized to use. And they say, hey, it's our place. Don't you worry about what we do on our place. And what is true about these proposals, but not brought forward by the proponents, is the entire scale of the activity. So you heard it described a bit, but it's important to visualize what's intended here. The coal is to be dug up from Wyoming and Montana in the United States, shipped over 1,000 miles by rail. Your proposed terminal involves 2 transshipments of the coal, right? 2 loadings, long ocean voyage to China, and there that coal is burned, and we will all get it back. All right? So when you take on this issue and assess it, a core question is, what do you look at? Do you look just inside the fence line, or do you look at the entire project? Now, our site is entirely what's called unimproved, and that is the true land use definition of it. Here it is, Cherry Point unimproved, and in order to load the coal, it has to be improved. Now, the Fraser Surrey Docks is an existing port, so in its entirety, it's not technically unimproved exactly. However, you will get to see this type of improvement coming your way. To decide whether this will be allowed, in any jurisdiction there is some version of a permit process. Bob described what you have in your case, and we have in the United States a more extensive process. We have extra process steps. But the most important thing I want to tell you tonight is that this is not what drives decisions, because the entire process is that official process plus how it relates to the community. We had our opportunities to do public comments prescribed by our process, and we turned that into a community conversation about the terminal. And we did it through the agencies they gave us these meetings to have. We had as many as 2,000 people show up at these meetings. But if you have less overt process, you do not need anyone's permission to have that community conversation. And we ran a kind of a controlled experiment, which is very revealing about this question. This amount of process we have, how much does it matter? Right? We have more in the US, you have less in Canada. And we have some pretty compelling information that it doesn't matter much. And the reason is 3 agencies participated in the United States. They participated in the exact same process. They received the exact same comments, 124,000 of them. They listened to the exact same public comments. And one of the agencies came to a wildly different conclusion about the scope of the inquiry. So the difference was not process. The difference was the environment in which those agencies operate. The Corps of Engineers operated in an environment, mostly back in Washington, D.C., the kind of big money, big power environment. They made certain decisions that were not very favorable, very limited scope. the state of Washington made very different decisions because they live in an environment of the government recently elected, and many of the people are so active in Washington for protecting our environment. And so as you consider your process, options that may seem limited at times, you want to recognize they decide in an environment that is around them, and that environment, it's you. A key concept of United States EIS's environmental impact assessment is the scope of inquiry. Now, you may not have this regulatory term, but it's a key idea no matter what. Scope is simply what should be considered when making a decision about the port. And you can measure it in the dimension of what impacts should be considered times what locations should be considered. And as you consider that scope, you consider the adverse impacts which could result from the terminal. And you've heard about some of them. You'll get a little more detail on particular ones from Dr. James, but there's 5 main categories of impacts. You have the mining of the coal itself, destroys water resources, causes other issues. Transit, which includes emissions, includes things like risks of collision. People get killed by these trains and walked emergency vehicles. You have the operations of the terminal itself that Phil showed you some really revealing pictures of, including things like pollutants going into the river or the sea. And you have marine impacts. Once the coal is loaded on the ships, what types of impacts do you then have, including one of the biggies, which is risk of collision and ships sinking. Now, for those who can count beyond 4, you may have noticed I said 5 major types of impacts. The combustion of the end product is the 5th major type of impact. And often this is described in terms of global warming. And that's certainly a very big concern. It's a very motivating concern for me. But it's bigger than that because those combustion products are things that harm life expectancies in China. Northern China, they've done studies. Coal emissions have shortened lives in certain areas by up to 5.5 years. So, if you have family in China, if you know anybody who has family in China, I guarantee you do, that's a real concern. There's emissions of mercury that comes back, and of course, the global warming pollutants as well. So in a larger sense, this is by tonnage and by total impact the biggest one, although it may seem farther away at times. Okay? Sorry about the timing. The auto time should be switched off. We have a key term called significant. It's things that the agencies will consider. You have to demonstrate that a particular impact matters, either in scale or severity, or how many people or how many resources will be affected by that impact. And as you describe the significance of your impact, there are various things you can do. And when I say you, I mean you in any setting. Your opportunity to comment in writing, comment in person, otherwise show your concern about proposals like that. Adding to significance is first the word sensitive, which describes that, hey, if something was happening in, let's say, some industrial area where nobody in their ordinary life would be exposed, you might be less concerned. But a sensitive receptor is a term that's someone harmed by an impact, such as schools. You may have a resource that's highly valued, such as the Salish Sea, the fishing and tourism resources, and ultimately resources that are irreplaceable. So these are all ideas that you can summon when you have your opportunity to describe to a decision maker why an impact is significant. We have an example. It's down in Bellingham, but I've been to Crescent Beach. It's very similar and a really wonderful setting, and boy, it's a match. And you can see the red line shows the rail lines going right through between the park and the rest of town. There's the potential that we'll lose all vehicle access and all emergency vehicle access to Boulevard Park. Situation very similar to what you'd face in areas from White Rock up through Crescent Beach. But as you look at these things, I want to urge you to really understand a given impact, because this is not Boulevard Park, right? This is a map. This is Boulevard Park. All of these places are places where we've been conditioned to accept a gradual deterioration in their original state, and we've been taught to no longer think of these places as being in any way sacred. And in fact, if you catch Bob later, he was telling me this fantastic story of rail execs saying, well, what did you expect living next to a railroad track? That exec, blissfully ignorant of the fact that some of those people had lived there before the railroad track. Another key concept to help establish significance of an impact is the permanent change of places like this to this. Now, I want to give you a working definition of permanence. Permanence is as long as you live, and as long as anyone you ever meet lives. Certain places that are now in a either natural state or a less degraded state will be permanently impacted, permanently either degraded or rendered lifeless. Let's look at another type of permanence, which is the reduction in places where animal life, where life can be. And the example I'm going to give you is the Cherry Point herring. And we have some time-lapse maps here, 1973 to 80, 1970s. The herring were doing pretty well. You see these maps that the big dot is like 1,000 herrings spawning each spring, or tons of herring spawning each spring. The West Shore Terminal is just off the map to the top left. So let's track what happened over time to the herring. Now this is not just due to the coal terminal. It's other impacts like refineries, but this is the sequence of events that happened after that terminal was installed and expanded operation, and other impacts came in at the same time. Here's the 80s. Okay, so here, let's go back to 70s for a minute. There's 70s, 80s, 90s. Last census that we have. Okay, so, this is a key species of fish that the salmon eat. The salmon, in turn, are eaten by the orcas. The orcas are well, what can you say about the orcas, other than we certainly don't want them to go? So, in the case of Cherry Point, this is particularly ironic because, now, if you had absolutely no sense of irony, and you just imagined at random where you would want to put North America's largest coal terminal, where do you think it would be proposed? So in our terminal, our proposed terminal in the US, the fate of the herring is a huge, huge concern. And I regret that I don't have specific information about species that you might be concerned about closer to Fraser Surrey Docks, except I can just guarantee you one thing, they're there. We went through a process of training people really quickly to comment in these hearings that we had, and I want to be really clear, you don't need permission to provide your comments in any setting. You can make the events, you can decide that you want to be heard. It's a real basic format. You say, identify the impact that you care most about, assemble your reasons that it's significant, use those concepts like permanence and sensitivity, and then ask for something. Always, always ask. Don't just rant. If you have the opportunity to communicate, don't say, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. No. Always, always ask. Really important reason is, one is they might just do it, the thing you're asking for. But secondly, anytime someone's listening to you, they're hearing about your impacts, if you ask them for something, they gotta stop and think about it. One extra step, because they have to decide whether they're going to do that thing you were asking for. So a really key, really effective thing is to ask for something, and you might be the one of you will be, the one who asks the question of a decision maker that brings the moment of clarity. That person, he may not have realized until that moment, this is wrong. That's the thing that we trained several thousand commenters over on our side of the border to do in connection with our coal terminal. It's the very simplest structure that we could use to arm people, do a little bit of focused research on one topic they cared about, and deliver their best possible input to the agencies. couple other key things about your comments. If you do have an impact you're concerned about, you do have to comment about something that is reasonably foreseeable. This again is a US term, but it applies. You can't make stuff up. So here's an example. The West Shore Terminal had a freak dust event, freak wind event. And you see the result there. Because nobody could possibly have foreseen that on the Pacific coast it would be windy. So do comment on things that are reasonably foreseeable. Another topic is, can it be mitigated? You may receive assurances, oh, we've taken care of that dust thing, right? We sprayed that gummy stuff on it, right? Mitigation is never 100% effective, right? That spray, it's 85% effective, right? Which means 15% what? Ineffective or something, right? I always feel really assured when I eat my breakfast cereal in the morning, it is 85% coal-free. Right? So all this adds up to, what's really going to change things? One or more impacts that people come to understand are, it's an adverse impact that's reasonably foreseeable, it's significant, and it will not be mitigated in the proposed plan. You can comment about any and all, many hundreds or thousands of different things, but these are the game changers. This is the thing that everyone is looking for. Because when these agencies make these decisions, they won't decide based on whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. Because bad ideas get permitted all the time. Right? There's no law that says you can't do something that's a bad idea. It's a much higher bar than that. The true bar is, can it be done in good conscience? Or is it unconscionable? So, if your intent is to stop this coal terminal or any of the other coal terminal expansions, you got to aim high, because your goal is to demonstrate through showing impacts that are reasonable, foreseeable, and significant, and will not be mitigated, that the project is unconscionable. So, you'll have a window of opportunity to contribute to this. And remember that model? Describe your impacts, have an ask, right? And hopefully create that moment of clarity. So, I better have my ask too, right? The significance to this, to me in a larger sense, beyond all these impacts, is we have the opportunity to turn away from the combustopalooza. Combustopalooza is the frenzy of finding and lighting on fire absolutely everything you can find, right? We have a milestone opportunity to do it. That's the significance for me. The two biggest moments in human history, and you're one of them, right? The first one was when we discovered how to light things on fire. It was a big moment, right? Okay, you could have cookouts. It was very special. The second moment in human history is when we decided not to light so many things on fire. So in accordance with that, I want to ask you to bring your concerns to your neighbors, to people you think may be decision makers, to friends, to people who will soon be your friends, and bring them awareness of these issues. Thanks very much for the opportunity to be here.
I've been asked to remind you that there's an email list that we'd like you to sign, and there's water on the side for people that are thirsty, and we can even organize, pass it down if you'd like, etc.
Coal-free?
Coal-free, guaranteed.
Well, it's at least 85%.
So it's a lot of these impacts, especially the ones as to. Thanks for your talk, James. It was enlightening as always. Especially on the Fraser River. Doug Massey is one of the few people that has said that one of the issues that hasn't been talked a lot about is the impact of this coal on the Fraser River, the #1 salmon river in the world. And studies have shown that around West Shore terminals, it's an ecological dead zone. In fact, you can go on their website and there's actually a graph, goes out to 1.6 kilometers, that shows how much coal's in the water and how much biological activity, and right beside the terminal there is none. And it's because of all the coal that blows off and lands in the water, so nothing can live there. And we're proposing to build this thing right on the #1 salmon river in the world. So that itself is a pretty scary phenomenon. It's so good that we have 2 speakers tonight who've come up from the United States to talk to us. And when we first started this, I think Stephanie was one of the people that did this, is we heard this expression that if we don't okay this, we don't let this come in here, the Americans really want this, and then they're going to get all the money down there, and they're going to build the ports, and it's going to go down there. And so some people contacted the organizations in the US, and they said, we're hearing the exact same story, except it is that if we don't okay these US terminals, it's going to go to Canada, and they're going to get all the money up there. So they were just playing one side against each other. And I guess one of the things that's so impressive about Dr. James and James coming up here and talking to us is they realized that if we're successful in stopping this particular application so that coal doesn't go through this port, there's a ton more pressure on their application in Cherry Point. But they've made it their mission that they're not just going to move the problem somewhere else. So they're not going to say, you know, no to Cherry Point, ship it to Canada. And they've come up here to help us. So our next speaker is Dr. Frank James. Get my glasses on. And Dr. James, I've listened to him. He's come up to, how many times have you come up here now? 7 times. From Bellingham, he's come up here 7 times. I know you've presented to the Metro Vancouver, the public hearing that they had. You've presented to the Vancouver City Council. He's attended almost all of these public forums. Leaves his family, leaves his home in Bellingham, drives up here, attends these meetings, knowing that if we're successful, he's going to have a bigger problem. He is the health officer for San Juan County, Washington, and for the Nooksack Indian tribe. He's a clinical associate professor of public health at the University of Washington for over 20 years. He's also one of the founding members of Whatcom Docs, a group of over 200 Whatcom County physicians who are deeply concerned about the health and safety impacts of the proposed Cherry Point coal shipping terminal, and are calling for an independent, objective health impact assessment of the project. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Frank James.
I want to thank all of you for taking the time to come on a hot evening and sitting in here in a stuffy room with a lot of people. What I can tell you is that 2 years ago, one of my physician friends said, you need to think about this, and began to tell me about what was planned for our community. And I was a busy guy. I have more jobs than you can fit on one hand. I teach, I do research, I'm a physician, I have a family, and what that person said made a difference to me, partly because of who it was. It was a woman named Sarah Mostad, and Sarah is she's smart, but more than smart, she's the doctor in our community that if your kid was critically ill, she's the one you would want taken care of, okay? She does have a PhD in epidemiology and an MD degree from Harvard. But she's got a great heart, and she's a mother of 3 kids. I mean, she's the doc I would listen to. And she came out and she said, you need to pay attention to this. And so I listened. Women are usually the leaders in communities, really. Us guys get to stand up and talk a lot, but that's who the real leaders are. But Sarah's got me doing this now, and it's been 2 years. And in that process, there were about a dozen of us. First there were a couple dozen docs, and then there were 90, and then there were 160, and then there were 215. And, but most of the work was done by about a dozen people. And what we did was we got together and we said, well, what's the real truth of the matter here? And being scientists and physicians, we decided we'd review the medical literature. So we did a search at the library, and we came up with about 400 articles that impacted this issue for us, that could be potential impacts. We actually at first thought they'd be evenly divided in 2 stacks, and we'd sort them out. And as we did it, more and more ended up in the stack that actually was concerning. And some of the docs would bring up issues, and like one of the docs said, you know, noise is a really big deal. And I actually smiled and I said, you gotta be kidding. No, not noise. But we went ahead and looked at the medical literature. Now we only looked, this isn't popular articles we looked at. We looked at articles that were published in refereed journals, which means they've been critically evaluated by people that had no interest in them to prove that they were really objectively factual. When we did that, we came up with a whole series of issues I'll share with you. But I want you to know that docs are busy people and we didn't do that. You know, when we did it, we didn't get paid to do it. We live in an uncivilized country. We're not like Canada. We don't have the paid medical staff. You do here in your health officers. In my health officer job, it's a one-day-a-week thing where I squeeze it in. Up here, you have competent paid professionals and good staffs. So when did we do this? We did it between 9 at night and 2 in the morning. And did we get together and do it as a group? We didn't have time for that. So we did it online, and then we shared our summaries. And then something smart that we did, there's two smart things we did. One is we shared them with each other. So we figured we should share these with everybody. It ought to be transparent. So if you want to see what our conclusions are, you can go to a website where there's the article and there's our analysis of it. And if you can come up with a better analysis of it that says it's not true, we want to hear from you. Okay? The second thing is we had Democrats and Republicans. We had business-associated physicians and we had physicians that were environmentalists and tree huggers. So nobody got to get away with anything. When I said, noise, no way, the guy said, no, actually, here's 3 articles, I want you to read them. So we came up with a list that I think is objective and accurate, and I want to share that with you. The other things, are, and James already showed a more elegant slide, this impacts a lot of people. And if you pick one spot, it isn't quite as impressive as you think about as a whole. So I'm taking my time to come here to talk with you, but I want you, in exchange for my effort, to think about everybody on that line. Okay, it's the people in Montana, it's the ranchers in Montana that aren't going to be able to ranch after generations and generations of doing it. It's the people in Spokane, which is right up there where the train comes across the Idaho border. They get 200 trains a day, okay? And they have a 20% increase in cancer rates. And that cancer rate falls off directly in proportion to how far you are from that rail yard. To the people in our community where we are going to get an impact. You're going to get 8 million tons. They want to put 50 million tons in my backyard. To the people in China. Now, I got to tell you, it's a little bit of an emotional issue for me because my wife just came back from China. And she came back because she'd been there visiting her aunt and her uncle. Her aunt had stomach cancer and had to have her stomach removed. That's in the past month. Her uncle has nasopharyngeal cancer, can no longer speak or talk. He breathes through a tracheotomy and is fed through a nasogastral tube. Her other uncle in the past 2 months had a stroke and died. These aren't theoretical things. You go to China and the impact there on people's health, we can measurably find 5.5 years shorter lifespan in people who live there. Okay? Now, in the world, we see longer and longer lifespans. We do not see shorter lifespans. It's one of the first times we've seen a shorter lifespan in a population. Now, their pollution isn't like ours. You know, when our pollution index gets to 100, the people that are in any way compromised are supposed to go and lay down, right? Theirs gets to 300. In Beijing, it recently went to 700. In fact, one day it went to 900. It is literally incompatible with life. So as we think about that, let's think about our backyard. Let's think about the dock down here and these trains, how it impacts us. But don't stop there. Think about the larger picture. Think about how it's going to impact other people. In fact, even the other end of the line. I was just spent the day not too long ago up near Texas Island. We had a meeting in Powell River. And those people, you know, there's only a few thousand people live on Texas Island. We've got somebody that knows 1,000 people. We actually have an expert in the back. I should listen. He's coaching me from the back. You know, most of those people make a living in industries related to this, and 80% of them are in favor of having a coal facility there. Now, partly they've been fed a lot of information by the industry that employs them often, and also who has a lot of money and is very powerful in that community. It's a very powerful economic entity in a very small town. we need to have solidarity with them and reach out to them and support them. So it's all along this line that we need to be mindful. Now, and as you can see, it goes all the way. This is James's slide. I stole it, but I want you to see the whole breadth and depth of what's going on. And now I'm going to talk to you about what it means to pick up these rocks. What I'm not going to talk about, and somebody should talk about, is the real facts about jobs. The 50 million tons they want to put the rock in, they say 250 jobs, roughly. Okay? What they don't tell you is the redevelopment downtown Bellingham. Recently, a pulp mill went out of business. We got 80 acres of waterfront back, like to redevelop for whatever we want. I mean, that's 5,000 to 6,000 jobs. 10% of those would be lost because this rail line cuts that off from the rest of town. So if you're thinking about jobs, sure, 25, it's a respectable number of jobs, and they're well-paying jobs. But I'd rather have 2 Starbucks, I think. Climate change is another issue. I'm not going to talk about that, but it's a really significant thing. I mean, look at New York City and when that storm came through there and filled every basin with water. If you think that can't happen here, we're silly, okay? And the economic and financial impacts and health impacts of something like that are substantial. Environmental impacts to plants and animals. What James showed you, that what happened to the herring along the coast where we live. You know, and the coal dust, what happens, it gets on the water, it settles at the bottom. You know why? One of the main mechanisms of that? The coal dust literally just settles on the eelgrass and the light can't get to it and it dies. And the herring have to lay their eggs on the eelgrass. No eelgrass, no herring, no salmon, no orcas. Now, this is not something, we can't just not think about that. I'm not going to talk about it, but we can't not think about it. The impacts on China are already mentioned. But I can't not talk about it at all. So I'm going to have one slide for each of those things. Now I'm a doctor, I'm going to talk about that, but these are things I've just come across in giving these talks and talking to people, but coal, both digging it up and transporting it, is the least job-generating thing you can do. The coal port near us, 1,400 acres, okay, of heavy industry. It's the only heavy industry land left in our entire county, 1,400 acres, 250 jobs. You could not pick any industry that would employ fewer people. It's not possible. This is data about Canada, and it shows you, for $1 million of gross output, how many coal jobs there are. It's almost the worst you can possibly do in terms of job generation. Now, that's for an economist, it's not for me, but just so you know, it's a real issue. Climate change. You can see that coal exports generate vast amounts of pollution, 256 million metric tons. Oil pipelines are bad, natural gas lines are bad. The cumulative effects, we can't think about these things in isolation. We have to realize that there are big impacts when you add them all together. These are the actual numbers of the current and proposed exports. The reason I want to talk about this is just briefly to say that there is about 100 million tons of coal capacity that's needed in China. That's profitable to export from here. And they're going to get it from here to China somehow, unless everybody says no. Okay? Now this is what's proposed right here. This is the CO2 emissions, that's proposed coal capacity, that's where the operators are, and that's where the projects are. You can see, some are in my state, some are in your province. But they're very substantial, and we have to have, any assessment that's done really shouldn't be just at one place. It needs to be the cumulative impact of all of them together. Obviously, things are bad in China. We can talk more about that. This is what got me involved. If they built our facility in our community, it would mean 1.6 mile long trains. And what you need to know about those, I don't speak metric and I apologize, we're one of 3 countries, the US and Burma and someplace else, that doesn't use the metric system, so please forgive me. But these trains take a mile to stop, a mile. So if they're, and in White Rock recently they found what that meant. A young woman was struck and killed by a train. And it was a lighter weight, slower moving train. If they run many of these, and they will run more of them. If they get the foot in the door here, I don't know who said it earlier, but this is the beginning. This is not the end. They say right now they want to put 8 million tons here. I do not believe at all that that is what their impact intentions are. And right now they say they're going to put it inside a building and seal it up and nothing's going to get loose and they're going to spray the coal and coal dust doesn't exist. That may be true for a month or a year, but you saw the pictures that our first speaker showed you. That was state-of-the-art technology, and you saw coal all over. And yeah, sure they're going to keep it in a house here initially to get you to buy into it, but when they ship it to Texade Island, if it's good enough for you, why is it not good enough for the people on Texade Island? Just because they're a company town, they deserve to have those exposures? Is that what they're thinking? It is what they're thinking. You know, James can be a little bit of a moralist, but honestly, there's nothing wrong with morals. If it's good enough for me, why isn't it good enough for them? Now, this is why I really came to talk, and this is what I actually know about. The rest, that's my opinion. This is actually some information. The real health issues, as we reviewed them, there's waterborne and airborne pollution, there's coal dust and diesel exhaust, there's increased train traffic, that leads to noise, delays in rail crossings, and the safety of ships and trains. Now, in reviewing those 400 articles, those are the issues we came up with. And let me just tell you that diesel particulate matter is probably the most concerning one of them. I have a few copies of this, of our work. There's 24 pages of detailed notes, single-spaced, with footnotes, reviewing all those articles. If you want to get these, I'm going to give you the reference where you can download them at your leisure online. I've got a little bit of paper. We cut down a few trees here. Diesel particulate matter is probably the most significant impact, and it's the one you can't see, okay? It's the small one. Particulates are 2.5 microns, so when you burn diesel, you get a particle that is small enough that it doesn't just go into your airway and get stuck there. It doesn't just go into your upper lung and get stuck there. 2.5 microns goes all the way to your alveoli and into your capillary. So it takes that particulate matter and puts it right into your bloodstream, okay? Now, when diesel is combusted, it forms a carbon core, and around that carbon core, I'll show you a picture in a minute, are toxins, the heavy metals, the products of combustion, the other types of toxins, a whole variety of things, but it's still only 2.5 microns, which means you can go into the deepest recess of your lung and get where it can cause problems. We now know in great detail the mechanism by which it works. There are plaques in our arteries that build up over time as we age, and the substances in those diesel particulate matter particles are what cause disruption of those plaques and will cause strokes and heart attacks to occur, most notably. There are a variety of other impacts, such as asthma in kids, abnormal lung development, a lot of other problems. So, impaired pulmonary development in adolescence, it's proven to cause that. Increased cardiopulmonary mortality, that's a fancy way of saying heart attacks, and pulmonary emboli. Measurable pulmonary inflammation, that means that there's inflammation on your lungs. As many of you know, inflammation is the root cause of everything from cancer to heart attacks. Increased severity and frequency of asthma attacks, ER visits, hospitalizations for children in particular. Increased rates of myocardial infarctions, again, a fancy word for heart attacks, and increased risk of cancer. Those are all the consequences we found evidence-based, objective, scientific literature that said those are the impacts, okay? Now, we know that those are the impacts. What we don't know is how many people that will mean. Is that 1? Is that 100? Is that 10,000? We don't know the answer to that. What needs to be done is a health impact assessment. And you will find out likely tomorrow that a health impact assessment is going to be done for this site. And we've been working with the health officers up here for 2 years. Every time we consume something, I've been sending it to all the health officers from Montana to BC. So they've been aware, and they've been in negotiations, and I believe that tomorrow, certainly within the next week, there's going to be an announcement that they're going to do a health impact assessment for this particular facility. That's a great thing, except quality counts. Some of you are probably teachers, right? You know that the C student and the A student are different. Certainly different than the E or the F student. The detail is going to matter. And politicians and professionals can only do what there's a political base to support. I know that the health officers have asked for the best, the absolute best health impact assessment done. But it's a negotiation they've been negotiating for weeks. So when that comes out, not only do you want to be happy about it, but in addition, you want to look at the details. And unless it meets muster, there is a standard for doing health impact assessments. And it's a very objective international standard established before they started this discussion. It has to meet that standard, and if it doesn't, it needs to be taken back to the port and say, no, this is not good enough. And just like James said, you do not need permission to do this. You don't need a formal governmental process. You're not here because anybody invited you, but you reached out yourself to come here when you found out about it. You can take action, and you may need to. Coal dust is the other thing. Coal dust is a thing that the port really wants to talk about. Their initial discussions about health impact assessments, they fine, we'll do one. We'll look at coal, and we'll look at coal dust. They didn't want to look at any of the other things on my list. And the reason for that is they can put hairspray on the top, fancy glue, and they can keep the dust from blowing out, they believe. And that's true 85% of the time, as James pointed out. The other 15%, it's 500 pounds per car per trip. 15% of 500 pounds per car per trip is still a lot of pounds of coal dust. Even if they put it inside this building that's vacuum packed, and it might operate perfectly for the first 6 years, eventually it's not going to be operating perfectly, as we saw in the first set of slides. Coal dust is a very serious thing, and the biggest risk for coal dust is actually the people that work there. They're going to need to be wearing masks, or there are known dramatic and significant consequences. Chronic bronchitis, emphysema, pulmonary fibrosis, And then the other issue is when this stuff does get out into the environment, if the train does derail, there are all kinds of toxic heavy metals that can leach out of the coal and get into the water supply and get into the plants and animals that you and I or others may consume. Noise exposure was the one that I thought was not a big deal, right? It turns out that when you look at the medical literature, elders in particular, if you keep them up all night, if you wake them up every few hours with a train noise, they don't do so well, okay? It increases your blood pressure, cardiac arrhythmias, stroke risk, and ischemic heart disease. Those are all documented to increase just from noise alone. Now that's mostly in elders. Cognitive impairment also happens in kids. I'm going to show you a map in a minute of where the schools are relative to this project. You probably, if you saw the poster advertising this, what's on there is a map of all the schools and how close they are to this project. How close are they? They're too close. Too close. Cognitive impairment, what does it mean to have kids, and this is not going to go on for a month or a week, it's going to go on for years. What does it mean to have a whole generation not be able to concentrate on their schoolwork? What does it mean for people able not to sleep all night every night? People are going to be tired, they're going to have hypertension, they're going to have arrhythmias, they're going to have all the things that we talked about, and there's a documented increase in depression, in stress, anxiety, and psychosis. Those things all increase when you expose people to chronic noise. So I got schooled by my colleague, and and there's articles. You're welcome to review each and every one of them to see what that literature actually looks like. Now, probably the most immediate impact that we can see is the delay in emergency vehicles and response times. We've already in our community, because the trains not that are coming to the coal dump in our side, but the ones that are coming up here to BC already, we already had one incident where the patient made it, the doctor made it, and the guy that ran the heart-lung machine, he didn't make it. 20-minute delay. Now, in a hospital, I didn't ask if there were any physicians here, but we try to shave minutes and seconds off of response time, okay? The difference of a few minutes in responding to a stroke or heart attack, getting people fixed, a few minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes, that's a huge amount of time. If somebody shaves 45 seconds off, that's a big deal. What does it mean to add 20 minutes back onto that? It means people are going to die. It means instead of having a minor stroke you get full recovery from, you have a stroke that's devastating. These are not inconsequential, these kinds of delays. Even more significant might be the fire. If your house catches on fire and the fire truck can't get there. What if you need a policeman and they can't get there? These are real issues that need to be addressed. The increased accidents, I already mentioned, takes a mile to stop. We also have had a young woman die in our community. Another train hit a girl in that very park that James put the Boulevard Park just a few years ago. A young mother hit by the train and is gone. People don't survive those. The mass of a train, whether it's you're in a vehicle or walking on the tracks, they never survive them. If you want this data, like I said, I've got a few copies of the actual paperwork, but you can go to a site called coaltrainfacts.org. But if you go to it, the lead thing on it's going to be our data, and you can go and you can look at each and every article. And if you look at them, what you're going to see is this big long list of conclusions and the footnote and the summary of the article. Go look at them yourself. We've put it up there because we want the proponents of these terminals to tell us. Tell us, point out where we're wrong. Be transparent. I can tell you that my discussions with the people that want to build this terminal and the one in Bellingham, they are not transparent. They won't do this with their data, I guarantee it. BNSF knows exactly how much dust comes off every coal car. They've measured it. They won't share that information. They know what the pollution production capacity is, each of their types of locomotives. They won't share that information. Now, that's not how you make progress. You make progress by compromise and by sharing data and be open and going through a democratic process. They don't want to do that. Now, that tells you something. Now, the thing that we haven't talked much about is the marine impacts. What I can tell you is that that's the largest ferry that we have in ours. Now, you guys got a little bigger ferries, but that's the biggest ferry that we have in Washington State. And that's how big the ships are. Now, these ships aren't just big. The Cape-class ships are the largest things that human beings have ever made that moves. Now, I didn't get a chance to add them, but I have 3 photos from the last couple of months of these ships running aground and breaking in half. Okay? Now, think about this. They're going to ship it on barges up to the State Island and then ship it back down through here in these huge, massive ships. These ships have the worst safety record of any vessel. They are single-hulled. If you know anything about spills, single-hulled is not good. They are full of coal, but they have millions of gallons of diesel fuel to carry that coal across the ocean. Okay? So it may not be an Exxon Valdez spill, but there could be literally tens of thousands of gallons of diesel in the bay. This is a very bad idea. And whether it's here or whether it's our terminal or your terminal or somebody else's terminal along the coast, we are all threatened by that. The tourism industry, does that bring money into BC and Washington? It's massive. Now, they want to tell you that there isn't going to be any dust, right? You've already seen this picture. That's a picture a nice Canadian guy took and sent down to me, and we've been able to use it. But that's actually, you can't even see, the 60-foot tall piles because it's blowing. Routinely, people find coal dust about 5 kilometers away from where they live. I mean, where these things are. If they live 5 kilometers away, you can expect it routinely to go that far. And if it's landing on your furniture, your lawn furniture, it's probably not just on the lawn furniture. They'll tell you that these ships are very safe, and yet December 7th, this is what we saw. We saw one go through the dock, right here at West Shore. Are they safe? Sure, they're safe, except for when they're not. So in terms of what these things do, respiratory, cardiovascular, and neurologic impacts, we can see that they definitely cause asthma exacerbations, especially diesel particulate matter. They increase the rate of asthma. They cause chronic obstructive disease, the same thing that smoking tobacco causes. They cause stunted lung development in the kids that live near these facilities. They increase infant mortality measurably, and they increase lung cancer. Each one of those claims has a scientific article behind it. Okay, this is an opinion, they're facts. Cardiovascular effects, we talked about these already, to some extent, but the combined impacts of all those different things I talked about yield these impacts: heart attacks, strokes, arrhythmias, nervous system effects, ischemic stroke, cerebrovascular disease, loss of intellectual capacity, decreased mental function through learning. Now, there aren't many young people here. Most people have got gray hair like me, okay? But what we need to know is that kids are not short adults, okay? They're different. And who gets impacted more? Children are going to be impacted more. Who's going to be impacted more than the average person? Elderly people are going to be impacted more. Throughout the literature, when we reviewed it, what we showed was impacts weren't evenly distributed in the population. Elders, children, people with pre-existing lung disease, people with pre-existing heart disease, diabetics, women over 50 were particularly impacted more than other populations.
Why?
I wish I knew. That's one of the mysteries in the literature, but it's worth looking at. I mean, it's asking that question, why? Why would that be? Now, could it be estrogen? Could it be, who knows? I don't think we know. The importance of doing a full health impact assessment is that we want to know just not that people, what I know now is that these impacts can occur. What I don't know is how many or who they'll be in. What's interesting about it in our community is usually these impacts are disproportionately on poor people. In our communities, disproportionately on rich people, because they live by the tracks, because the tracks go near the water. But knowing which people are impacted, which subpopulations are impacted, is critical to really understanding, and critical to you giving consent for this to happen. If you really don't want this to happen, it cannot happen. If a community stands up and says, no way, it isn't going to happen. When I testified in the city of Vancouver, I don't know if any of you were there, they recently rezoned the entire city coal-port free. Okay, 9 out of 11 people voted for it. And the most dramatic thing of all was the very end of the conversation, because a member of parliament from the east side of the province came, and he thought he was going to talk him out of doing that. And he got gradually more and more and more upset. And at the very end of the meeting, he was standing up and he grabbed the microphone and he stood up and he was doing this with his finger. He says, you can pass this rule, but the federal government will put a port wherever they want to. And the people were moderate on the council. They were really angry. It would be interesting to watch them try to put a port in the city of Vancouver. I mean, I got to tell you, I think there'd be open rebellion. I think that, well, what would happen is that that person who was standing up there, he would no longer be a member of parliament. And honestly, that may be what it takes. It may take you organizing to replace. Because these people got money, they have power, they're connected. The people doing it in my community, when you chase it all back, Goldman Sachs, Berkshire Hathaway, SSA Marine. SSA Marine you may have never heard of. They're the largest private operator of ports in the world. They're global. Berkshire Hathaway you probably know. That is the largest private equity firm, I think, in the US. Okay? And Goldman Sachs is the largest investment bank in the US. So these are not inconsequential people, and they're used to getting their way. You know, typically when an Indian tribe, when a First Nation community, when they say we have a treaty right, they have treaties, those treaties have rights, and they say we don't want a permit to go forward, the Army Corps of Engineers does not deny it, they just never process the permit. Okay, that's the civic way that it happens. Well, this permit is being processed despite numerous tribes saying exactly that. This is absolutely unequivocally not okay. Why would it go forward anyway? Because there are very rich and powerful people that stand to make a lot of money. How much money? I was shocked. What do you think the port in my community would generate in terms of revenue? $5.5 billion. That's why. Because they're buying this coal from the public. This coal isn't privately owned coal. This is U.S. public land. And it's being sold to the coal companies for $12 a ton. And they're selling it in China for $125 a ton. Yeah. How's that? The chart that I wanted to show you, and this is one that you've seen before, is basically there's Fraser Surrey Docks, and each one of those gray areas is a school. And there's where the rail line goes. This would seem like a very bad idea to me. And like I said, protecting children is a big deal. They're not little adults. They eat more, they breathe more, they drink more per weight than adults do. They're developing, so there's huge impacts on their system from these types of exposures. You know, James said if it's morally unconscionable, you shouldn't do it. If impacting children is not morally unconscionable, what is? The dust itself, as I said, it goes off in the air, but it also can go in the water, and it can leach out mercury, lead, and cadmium. There's currently a case in Bellingham right now that I just agreed to be a witness for, that somebody said, hey, coal's coming up to BC right now through our community, and guess what? It rains. And when it rains, it leaches those things out. mercury, lead, cadmium. They're not good things. And so that's probably illegal. So we have a suit right now. Now, the way these ports work, the people building the port in our community, when they want to do that, they went out before they had the right permits or anything. They built a 9-mile long road, went through Aboriginal graveyards, and filled in wetlands without a permit. Now, why do you think they did that? Because they knew what the county's response would be. What did the county do? It fined them. It fined them $2,000. Now, just the interest income on the loans they have to do this, that's not even rounded off. That's probably 30 seconds worth of interest income. Okay? Now, we were fortunate in our community. We have a group called Resources, which is an environmental group there, and they said, that's not okay. And in America, we're fortunate we have the Clean Water Act. And so Resources sued them. What do you think the settlement was? Yeah, SSA settled rather than suing the suit. $1.6 million. That's what a private group of people got from SSA for what they did. $1.6 million. The county, $2,000. Sometimes you have to take matters into your own hand, and sometimes individuals can be more effective than elected officials. Because unlike some realize, this guy in the back, he's a wonderful person. And he was, well, you came a long way, but I came a ways, you came further, because I've been up to this. Yeah, it's, but not everybody is an enlightened politician. Some need a little enlightening. And that's your job. The people in this room, that's one of the things you got to do. A little bit more just to firm up some of the things I said. The decent particulate matter, it doesn't, the 10 micron size stuff stops in your airway, you know, the 2.5 gets deeper down, gets all the way to your alveoli. So, and that's a really important concept to have. And as I said, this is what that decent particulate matter looks like. It's got that carbon core, it's got organic compounds around that. Once you combust it, the carbon core forms, and then in that kind of smoke around it, these things all latch onto that carbon core. And that's what goes in your alveoli and into your bloodstream. That's why it causes heart attacks and strokes. Decent particulates get made by a lot of different things, by shipping, by wood stoves, by trains, by trucks. But all the cars in the United States and trucks in the United States have for 2 years been absolutely decent particulate free. 0 emissions, none. It's technically possible. But the railroads were so powerful they got exempted from the law. We're going really late, so I'm going to skip through some of these. So let me just say that, in closing, that a gentleman came up to me before this, Dave Shenton. Dave, where are you at? Did he step out? Well, I wanted to show you what Dave's doing, and it's really cool, because he presented me with a hockey puck. Now, what it says on one side is, coal dust can kill, and the other side, no coal dock. But you know, what this reminded me is that everybody can do something. You know, maybe it's make a hockey puck. Now I'm going to take this hockey puck with me, and I'm going to show it at every talk I give. Because to me, what it means is that you can do anything. Everybody can do something. You can certainly call your MLA, you can call your member of parliament, you can write them letters, and you can and should. But you also may have a talent. You may have a gift that nobody else has got. I've never heard of anybody making hockey pucks, okay? But to have one that says this, that's powerful stuff. And everybody's got something like that, whether it's, you know, speaking with your MLA or speaking with your member of parliament, or whether it's like the women that organize. These are not professional organizers. Stephanie has become a good friend of mine. I talk to her as often as I talk to my wife some days. And her and her husband do and have done an amazing job of pulling this together. You know, I'm here and my wife supports me, she's here and her husband supports her, because it makes a difference. Okay, now she's caught on fire about it and organizes all these things, and now I don't have to, I just show up and talk. But you can take on any role you want, as big or as little as you want, but I think inaction really is not an option. This is a significant thing, and as I said, I'm anticipating that as soon as tomorrow they're going to announce they're going to do a health impact assessment. We need to look at that and make sure it's one that really is going to ask all the questions and not just cherry pick the questions. I know that what they asked to start with was just to respond to coal dust. Because in many people's minds, if you're not informed, you think coal dust is the issue. It's not the most important issue. And what they think is that they can mitigate coal dust. They can put it in a vacuum-containing room, and they can spray more hairspray on top. And maybe they can mitigate those, and good for them, they can and should, but they shouldn't get away with calling that the whole deal. They got to decrease noise. Now, you guys may be luckier than us. In the US, if there's an at-grade improvement for a railroad to decrease noise or to increase safety, it's built every time, and who pays for 95% of it? By federal law. The local area. My city, my county is who has to pay for it. And one overpass, as I said, $60 million. Okay? We have to pay 95% of the cost, even if it has to be done because of the project. Because that's what our federal law says. And they bought, like my Democratic, nice, progressive Rick Larson that represents me, that I have donated money to and worked to get elected. How much money did he get this year? He's not running for office, but how much was donated by the railroad to him? $150,000 so far. And $50,000 more from railroad affiliated interests. $200,000. So I'm hoping Rick doesn't get elected next time. And going from being a supporter and a person that really was on his side, over my dead body is he going to get elected next time. And those are the kinds of decisions you're going to have to make. Those are the kinds of things you have to do. So I talked a long time. We want to get our group up here for questions, I think. So I'm done. Thank you.
Nicholas, did you have a question? Someone pointed at you. Or did you want to say something, Mike?
Very quickly,
Sure.
I appreciate the work people are doing here, because I don't think this is the kind of fight that little islands with 1,000 people should be fighting amongst themselves over. This is a global issue. It's not a local issue. It's a global issue. I think that's the message that I want to bring forward. But it's a battle that we are sort of losing right now, because we've seen the expansion of the terminals at Neptune and at Ridley and at West Shore. So this is sort of, if we can do something to bring attention to this, and thanks Doc for the endorsement. I wish you could vote here. You know, go get $150,000 from a rail company. It's shocking. But I just think that, you know, people here do have the power to affect change. And, you know, I know you had an MLA here who took this issue on very strongly. This Guy Gender, he now lives up in view of Texada Island, and he's helping out with making sure that people are aware of the public policy that's changing so rapidly. You know, we're seeing a sea change in the public policy of British Columbia, doubling our thermal coal exports. You know, British Columbia previously has been proudly exporting, you know, that 90% of the coal we produce in BC is metallurgical coal. And I know that there are issues around that, but here we are about to double the thermal coal exports. We see no exports of our own metallurgical coal, and that's just a side issue. I think, I thank everybody in the towns and whoever's organized this, and thank you for letting me know about it.
Thank you. This lady here, do you have a question, please?
Is the media here too?
Is the media? I think there was one person from the media here.
Yeah, there was a very nice lady from the CBC, the French version of that. My French isn't too good, but I did an interview earlier. And CBC originally asked to interview me this morning too, but they didn't get back to me in the time frame. But they've been pretty responsive, and I'm going to be on the Sing. How do you say his first name? Apra Singh show, TV show, the 26th as well. So there is some media interest, yes. Well, one thing else.
I sense that, like, I don't see anything in the paper, a little write-up in one of the, 24 hours or something. But the local media not really got involved. Not.
I know that either.
Could I just say that there was one thing that I did see. There was an op-ed piece, a puff piece by a PR firm that got passed off as a real article. It was amazing that they published it, because it was a guy who knows nothing about China going on about how the Chinese deserve the right to develop. I've got a lot of relatives in China. That's not how they feel. But look out for those people. This is a guy, I chased him back. It's fun to chase the names back. He's a guy that has owned gold mines, and he's in a public relations firm that does PR work, and he passes himself off. The other person is a technical expert that was said to be a teacher and researcher and all that, that testified several times. I chased him down. You know what? The last article I find he published was on clams, and it was in the 70s, and he has no CV online, and he's never taught anywhere that I can tell of. So be cautious about these people that puff themselves up as experts for the coal industry, because when I've chased them down, they're not what they seem to be.
So there has been a fair bit of press. It hasn't been as much as we would like, but yes, there's been some great articles in the. Right. There has been some progress, and there's actually going to be some. Paula's been asked to speak at one of the Sikh temples. We're going to be on a Sikh radio station. I think Paula was on a Sikh radio station the other day. That community is getting behind this issue as well. There was some great articles in the Vancouver Sun. A lady who is a professor at UBC who pointed out all the governance issues with respect to Port Metro Vancouver. She got 2 great op-ed articles in there. So there's been some press, not enough. I agree. Sure.
I do want to respond a little to a gentleman from Texada, and come say hi after the talk. On the question of it's not a local issue, it's a larger global issue, but let me rephrase it. Is it a local issue or a global issue? Yes. Because what we find is no matter what scale you look at it, there's just no daylight between local to regional to national to global effects. There's these unifying themes of, carbon pollution. It's just carbon in the wrong form and the wrong place. And it doesn't matter whether that's excess CO2 in the atmosphere or coal dust or, or leaking petroleum, as the case may be. And so why that's important is because any individual in the public, you can find the thing that matters to you most. And never let anyone say, no, it's this issue, it's not that one. The one that speaks to you, maybe it's a particular impact, or maybe questions of, say, governance, right? There is something that inspires you the most, whether it's locally, regionally, globally, governance, or other things that will help you act, and you know what? That's the thing that matters.
Great. Yes, this lady, but I'm also going to ask Paul and Stephanie to come up, because I think they wanted to say a couple of words. This lady down here was first, right? I'll get you.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for their efforts today. It's incredible, but just wondering what we can do to become your soldiers and take action too. I mean, do you have a list of people that, and other than signing the petition, is there something that we can do to get on board and help you and donate our time and resources?
Signing the petition is important, but I would like every one of you to make an appointment with your doctor. You're honest. And go talk to him about this. Look up that stuff online and take it in and say, what's the deal? Because Canadian doctors are just a lot more civilized than American doctors. I mean, they really are. They're very, they're not very willing to get out there and duke it out. They just aren't. It's the culture, and so, but they do care about you. Your doctor cares about you, and you should go in and try to see if you can engage them around this. There are about a dozen docs, and we're going to get together here with Canadian docs up here. We've had 2 years run at this, and this is brand new to a lot of them. They're busy guys, they don't have time. But there's about a dozen. We're going to start meeting in the next month or so and try to bring the stuff we've done and give it to them. And the health officers here have been very responsive. I've worked with them for 2 years. And like I said, I think you're going to hear tomorrow a lot of bragging about the port doing the health impact assessment. Again, let's hold them accountable for doing a real one. But definitely talk to your doctor, write your letters, sign the petitions. Yes?
Paula or Stephanie should perhaps...
Paula, I mentioned Stephanie because I didn't see that Paula was here, but Paula and Stephanie are amazing organizers. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Paula, and you asked the question, what can you do? Well, I live in South Surrey, and this was sort of where I started too. What can I do when I first learned about this? And this was back in June, and myself and Matt over there, we decided to hold a town hall meeting in our community to share what we had learned with our fellow residents and see where we would go. And we had about 150 people show up, and they probably felt a lot like you, and by the end of the night I had 70 volunteers who wanted to go forward and do something more. So we had another meeting and another meeting and another meeting. We got organized, we came up with an action plan, And part of the plan was just community awareness. So that was at the end of June, so it's just been over 2.5 months. We've gone to farmers markets, festivals, we've gone door to door with our petition, we made lawn signs, we have brochures. That's all in 2.5 months. We have 9,000 signatures from our group alone. It can be done. Like, it's not, I'm a mother, I have 2 small children. You know, I'm tired, but it can be done when you have a lot of good people following you and you come together as a community. We can win this. We just have to fight it. You just can't sit back and say, well, I'll wait and watch and see what happens. You gotta stand up for what you want.
I'm Stephanie Smith, and I began this coal journey in beginning of February when I saw my first coal train in the winter, in November. But I was just one person. I went around and parked trails and just talked to people, especially when a train was going by, saying, hey, what do you think of those coal trains? And did you know that's U.S. coal? And did you know it's the cheapest coal? And it's thermal coal. It's not metallurgical coal like steel, BC coal. And you know, it's getting burned and all this stuff. And got more people engaged. And just one person put flyers out, got hooked up with Kevin Washbrook with Voters Taking Action on Climate Change, and the gal down south, Julie Trimmingham with Coal Train Facts, got them to come to this meeting at my hairdresser salon. That's where it all began. And I'm just one person, and so I, you know, just talking to people, getting them on my emailing contact list. I'm an information, I was going to say a bad word, but I'm like one of those people that's just information all the time. And so I wanted to educate and inform people, because I think awareness is key. Educating yourself on this, being, you know, informed of the risks and stuff, so that when you hear something on the news and they're saying it's all dandy and everything's fine, you're like, wait a minute, and you know a bit more. They just can't pull the wool over your eyes. But you know, so to me, having everyone talk to one another is really important. Even if it's just a cashier lady at the store and you say, you have kids? Yeah, well, do they live in the school here? You know, God, you really should check out this website. Yeah, coal-free, we have a website called coalfreewhiterock.ca, and she has communitiesincoal.com. And we put all kinds of things on there. I have a Facebook page called No Coal Surrey/White Rock. Try to put stuff on there too. But that's the key, talking to one another. And I hooked up with Paula here about a month and a half ago, started organizing these town hall meetings, getting people aware. And what we really want to try to motivate people is to start something in your own communities. And we already have the tools for you. You can just cheat off them, tweak them, make them the way you want them to for your municipality, and just getting people just more engaged with that and involved, and say, hey, you know, this is our kids, this is my grandchild, I'm not going to sit back. And just kind of think about it. This is your backyard. This is going to change the face of the Lower Mainland forever if they get their way and keep going forward and making a bunch of money for a handful of people, and then we pay the costs. So anyway, thanks.
So especially here in Delta, Delta Council has been deadly silent on this issue. White Rock has passed a motion saying they are completely opposed. Surrey has passed a motion demanding that the Port Metro Vancouver hold a full public hearing. So they've passed that motion and sent it off to Port Vancouver. Delta has said absolutely nothing. So if you live in Delta, you have a big job. These guys would love to see that Delta says nothing, and that New West says nothing, and Surrey says nothing. So one of your jobs is to go out there and to make sure that Delta stands up and said, because Delta's got to be one of the most impacted communities from coal and trains and shipping and the port facilities. It's just tearing it apart. So we're almost out of time. I'll take 3 more questions. And this lady here had her hand up for quite a while.
Hi. It's not a question, but it really is more of a statement.
Okay.
I live right across from the proposed coal port. I live on River Road on the Surrey-Delta border. I know a lot of people here, but I didn't see many of them at an open house that was held by BNSF and the Fraser Surrey Port at Guildford a couple of months ago. So I just wanted to reiterate a few things that they said. One was they had promised us that they would get rid of the biofuel dust, I think that's what it's called, that comes out of the ships right now by the end of that month. I don't know if you've looked at the ships lately, but the biofuel is still pouring into those ships, and they've not eliminated the dust that blows out of them all the time. The next thing is they're going to be laying down additional track going into the port. And what they will be doing throughout the night with these 2-kilometer-long trains is they will be breaking the trains up into portions and shunting throughout the night to get them prepared for the next day. So I wanted everybody to be aware of this. I am very concerned about the noise also. I know what you said about the health risks. The other, one last thing is that they said there will be an outside storage that will not be covered. Yes, everything else will be covered, but this one outside storage, right. However, not to worry, it's never going to be used, it's just a backup.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm really surprised to hear they didn't stand by their word. Doug Madsen.
I'm really disappointed in our local council. I mean, and you should be too. I mean, they did not. The mayor didn't vote for the requesting a health impact study when the regional governments. There's a 21-3 vote, 21 to have a health impact study, and our own mayor, she didn't vote on the issue. She preferred to not to vote on it. Well, I mean, this is where she lives. This is your community. What's going to be probably the most affected by this new dock, and yet every one of you should send the mayor and council an email, every one of you, and say, hey, where are you on this issue? Why haven't you come and looked after our interests, our health impact interests? And they haven't done it. Where's your MLA for this area? Where's Mr. Hamilton? He's the Bruce Hamilton. He's
sitting on the fence. Both.
Well, you know why? Because he was on the same council that did not, support this. So and now he's a full-fledged liberal in the government.
And also a councillor.
And also a councillor. And yet, where are they? Why haven't they spoke up? They should be speaking up for you. That's what their job was. You elected them to do that. I mean, and I know Vicki Huntington is an independent from our general area. She spoke up against it. But she's not here tonight either. I sent her a personal invitation. I sent council, mayor, and council a personal invitation to come. So they're not as if they weren't aware of this. And the local papers, where are they on this issue? I mean, they should be here. I would be really angry if I were you. I mean, come on. They get big advertisements from West Shore terminals. Maybe that's why. But that's part of the game, I guess. I mean, they contribute a lot to the community activities. But anyway, please take time, send me your emails, let them know, look, where are you on these issues, and come out and be concerned about the health impacts on your community.
Okay, thanks, Doug. 2 more questions. Right there, that gentleman. Okay, I couldn't hardly see you back there.
Forget about them, accept the present problem. We should go all after teachers because they are the ones that always advertise health of children and education of children. We should all talk to children about the day's life. Now that will be effective. People will get the message. Thank you.
Okay, good point. I'll take 1 more question. Grant, I think you had your hand up for a while.
I just wanted to, Dr. Frank James mentioned follow the money. Macquarie owns Fraser Surrey Docks.
Right.
Most people here know that.
Who does?
Macquarie, a company called Macquarie.
$53 billion market cap company based out of Australia. They own Fraser Surrey Docks. So when you follow the money, the taking out of the tunnel, it's all related to bringing in big ships into Fraser Surrey Docks. It's all connected. Just follow the money. Because they're the ones that were involved in the four-man bridge as well. We were original financier of that. So they're going to just move their capital down the river to build a new bridge. And then expand that port for big ships. But I wanted to ask Dr. James, if you can, if you have intelligence on what is coming out with the health impact study. You mentioned that the request is in, but the port, Metro Vancouver, and Fraser Surrey Docks is steadfastly refused to take any impacts beyond the gates of their facility. Is this something that's going to be back in this case?
So in our case down south, the the people that want to build it there have great influence at the federal level, and unsurprisingly, James went over very quickly, but the Army Corps of Engineers, the federal regulator, isn't going to look at anything outside the fence, nothing. Okay, no transportation, no nothing. Okay, the local folks, because we did put in 120,000 comments, the local politicians decided they would look at those things. So the state environmental review process is going to look at all the cumulative impacts, the international impacts, and all the transportation impacts. And I think that just speaks to money and politics, and that's about it. I don't know. I know that for the past few weeks, the health officers have been negotiating with the port. I know that they're very close to an agreement. It'll likely be released tomorrow or certainly within a week. I have shared, there are international standards. There's an international document, the standards of documents of what is included in health impact assessment. I would be shocked if they were going to meet the standard. If they don't meet the standard, the community's got to stand up and say something. Because the health officers have already been doing your bidding for you as best they can, I'm sure. I've listened to what they have to say. They're doing the very best job they can. But it may take political pressure to get a full impact assessment. And so once it gets released, I'll be looking at it. I'll be checking to see if it's complete and accurate and full or not. And if it's not, I think the only way it's going to be changed is for the citizens to rise up and say, no, you're going to include, you're going to do it properly. Objective, independent, and full-bodied, including all the issues that should be addressed. So, I don't know, we'll find out in the next, maybe even tomorrow, certainly within a week. And when it's out there, if it doesn't include the off-site impacts, it's going to take your political action to make them change their mind.
So once you've had a chance to review it and maybe get the word to Stephanie, I get a lot of emails from Stephanie, thank you very much. But if she can get the word out, if you have concerns on any part of that in health impact study, if you could pass the information through her, then she can get it out to us.
Sure, I think I already sent her the documents as I did with the health officers. So they've already got what the standards are internationally, and it should be a pretty easy matter to do it. And I'd be more than happy to do that. So, communitiesincoal.com. Communitiesincoal.com will be one of the places where that'll show up. And if you want to sign up on any of the lists and get on an email list, it'll come straight to your box. Right, ladies?
That's right, yeah.
Yep. Well, it's 9, right?
It's past 9.
Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you very much.